to presentation. Great, thank you. As Anna said, thanks everyone for being here, and looking forward to this next about just over an hour and 15 minutes of conversation on it. This is, as everyone has said, is about the fundamentals of business planning. Just a really quick thing about this is, so what is this going to be about? This is going to be a conversation. It's a small enough group. And I think please use that opportunity. We can have a very interactive conversation here. So we've tried to minimize the theory. We've tried to minimize the one-way flow of information. So hopefully it will not just be me or Shriyanka speaking, but conversations around things that really matter to you, things that you're facing that you'd like to solve and like to have some conversation about. So we focus on that. Why does it matter, business planning? I think it matters because it has come up a lot. And there are different words for this. Some people will prefer to use strategic planning, saying, well, we're not running a business, it's a strategic plan. But whatever label one gives to it, increasingly we've seen a lot of folks say that we really like to know what you're planning to do, how you're planning to do it. And that just lets us or gives us that confidence that that this is going to work, that there is a very clear end goal, and this is what we're going to try to do. And that's why I think it's something to care about, to understand what this is, and to see how this can work for you, which is something that I'll emphasize at the outset. What we'll focus on here are the fundamentals of it. We won't focus on, oh, here's this template that you must use. You must do things like this, because each organization is different. You all will do things your own way. So my request to you would be, please keep focusing on, what do I want to get out of this? Is this conversation helping me? If it's not, please speak up right away and say that, hey, can we really talk about this instead? And I get this, but I'm really interested in this other thing, which is kind of the ground request. If you could please turn your videos on. I do appreciate, like, if internet's an issue, as Rafa said, that's perfectly fine. But if you can keep your video on, that just helps in this thing of it, that we're talking to with one another. And as I said, please keep it interactive. So I would request, if you're not speaking, to be on mute, otherwise the background noise can be a little distracting. And the last one, very hard nowadays. But I would request if you could try, it's less than 90 minutes now, so if you can keep the phone away for a bit, that would be super helpful and help us have a good conversation here. All right, so just very briefly on the agenda, we'll tweak it a little bit, but we've done the introductions, and now we can actually get into this a little bit. So the importance of business planning, and just why do this thing at all. Some of the components of a business plan, what are they, and how does one create and actually use this, and time for Q&A at the end. Having said that, like I said, if you have a question that you think is makes sense right now, please come off mute and just interrupt. You don't even have to raise your hand or any such thing. It's a small enough group that all of that will work fine. All right, we've actually kind of done this already. So thanks everyone. You've kind of covered this: name, role, what you'd like to do. So thanks Anna, we've already done that. And let's just go straight to what we've heard from you. There are a few others of you who are not here because we're doing another session later, at least for me tonight, which would be for the Americas group. But this is a lot of what we heard from you. And thanks for filling out some of those surveys that we sent ahead. And it was quite interesting. Just a little bit of it as a group. A lot of folks have a vision, mission, goals already in place. And we'll talk about how that differs from number 2, which is, do you have a business plan? And you can tell that it kind of comes down a little bit, that we have part 1, maybe not really part 2. And then the other one, which is a little different, which is, have you looked at where you operate, your ecosystem? And we'll get into some of that in a little bit. But that's basically looking at who else is working in my sector, and have I done some amount of analysis on that? So it's something of an even split on the last one. So just a little bit on where the group perhaps is. The other thing that was really interesting, if you look at that one, so we'll just look at the top three, right? So the first three on the list are also the top three here. Very, very interesting. It kind of reflects what some of you have already said, that, so how do you describe strategic planning today in your organization? So very significant numbers saying strategy changes frequently, we're figuring things out, and that's our reality right now. Kind of the largest respondent group said, well, the next 1 year is clear to us. Beyond that, perhaps not so much. So we know what we're going to do for the next year, but after that, and the third on that list is, well, we have a strategy for the next 3 years, and perhaps after that, a little bit less clear. So, right. So if you add all of that up, that's more than 3/4 of the group. Something like 80% of the group are in that thing. So a lot of differences even in these responses, and also from the introductions from the group has said. So with that, we'll kind of get into actually starting this thing out. And as I said, the effort here will be to keep this as interactive as possible in terms of why is this important. And so I'll kind of put this, we'll put this question to you. And I'll hand over to Shriyanka at this point to maybe run a quick poll on this.
Can I just make a small request and ask you to please define what is business planning? Maybe I joined later, yeah. Or like as simply as possible. Like what is, because I have been really having a difficulty to understand this particular phrase with respect to our organization, because like we don't have any brand that we are trying to sell. I mean, we do some pro bono work. So how should we understand this particular thing?
Yes.
Or what does this mean for us?
All right. So thank you, Rafael. We'll just come to that in a moment. This is actually exactly the flow we were hoping for. So we'll put this question to you. We'll see what responses come in, and then we'll actually define it. Because to the question you asked, there are many different definitions of business plan, and so part of this will be to try to uncover that.
Hi, everybody. I shared a link on the chat, which is basically a chat, which will take you to a group like link where you can fill in your responses. You will be allowed to do 3 responses. So the question is also there in the link itself. What would you use a business plan for? Once you have done it, it'd be awesome if you can just give a thumbs up on the Zoom link itself. Thanks, Joel. That's really quick.
I only saw one question. Is that okay? just to be on the safe side. Was it more than one question?
No, for sure. It's just one question. Has everybody had a chance to look at it? Is everybody done? Okay. For some reason, the answers are not showing. So I'm going to continue working on it. Arjav, I feel like you should just take it.
Sure. So we'll go ahead with that then, Shankar, while you do it, and you can display once you have them. And so let me ask you a question. Maybe show of hands would help. How many folks had on that list of how many of you had fundraising or proposal writing or funding on that list? Yeah. Okay, 1, 2. All right, that's 3. All right. Okay.
I had team, so
all right.
So.
No, that's different. That is different. So there's team. So funders, team, any other people that came in on your lists?
I wrote partners, grantors, donors. Same.
Okay. All right. So funders, team, partners, any others on that list?
I wasn't quite sure about this one, but I put the website on there in that everyone could potentially see our business plan. But I thought maybe that was a conversation starter for later.
All right. Yeah.
I also wondered about that one.
All right. No, very, very interesting, because it's something we'll come to later in this conversation around who do you share your business plan with, who sees it. And so it's a really interesting point, because I think you'll find different perspectives on that. So we'll come to it. Anybody want to take a crack at, so some folks here have a business plan, and we'll come to defining it in a moment. How is it different from, because funders came up quite a bit for lots of people. How is it different from a proposal? Any thoughts on that?
I'm just wondering if the business plan would be more focused on goals and results, perhaps more so than you would put in a funding proposal, but I'm not sure. We try to sell ourselves to funders based on, tangible results and what we seek to achieve in the future. So I am actually struggling to see a clear difference between the two.
Okay.
I read actually a bit differently, not exactly one word from for each, let's say, things. I write, for example, that the business plan, it will relate it to the describing your existing conditions, and then it will, let's say, it will have to do with your strategy, how to do that to reach the target and so on.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
What is the target and how to do that? Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yes. Francis, is your hand raised? Or,
Yeah. Well, I don't see a lot of difference. It's I'm more used to like hearing a proposal or like a project plan instead of a business plan. But I think it's as I've said, it's two things. What are you trying to do and how you're trying to do it? And maybe the business part of it, because sometimes we don't put in a lot of it doesn't project proposals tend to be what's within your project and not what happens after the project. But I think the big difference for me is that you're actually looking at how can you keep on doing what you're doing now even beyond this project term. So it's like that's the business part of it. So like you're looking at and maybe funders would also like to hear that or see that, like how do you continue even if we don't give you money, like will somebody, will somebody else give you money, or will your constituents give you money? Which I think is, it's a reasonable expectation, I suppose. Like if we're doing something good, then we should be getting support.
All right, thank you. Thanks for that, everybody. To just come back and round up on that point, it's very interesting, and it's something that we see quite consistently. As that funders, donors, it's kind of the biggest word there, which means the most people voted for it. And then the others are, well, there's team, my team, board, partners was mentioned, colleagues. So if you add colleagues, team, my team, and it's good to see that that's in there as well. And as was said, interesting stuff such as should it go onto the website. So thanks, Shriyanka. You can close that now. And so what's the importance of that, right? What we just touched on. Let me just continue where we were. Sorry, is that visible now? Is that, yeah? Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you. All right, so moving to presentation mode then. And on that point, and Rafael, come back to your point now. This whole thing of what do you use a business plan for? What is a business plan? In short, I think we've covered it, but there's a very important part of it to kind of add. The definition of a business plan, the formal definition, is kind of what a few of you have touched on. And Paul in particular gave a rather nice, concise definition of it. It is about where do you see yourself in a few years, or your organization in a few years? What are you going to accomplish? What milestones will you achieve along the way? So you could say that in 5 years' time, this is what we see. Some organizations will even go further and say that, look, in 10 years' time, this is what we would like to see. There are some climate organizations that would do that and have this really big thing about the vision around global climate even. And to get there, these are the steps that we will accomplish along the way. This is what we as an organization will do, and here's how we will do it. We will touch on these components later, but the how covers things like what kind of team are we going to build? What kind of partners will we work with? What kind of work will we actually do? So the vision part is there, but now getting from here to there, how will that go on, is kind of what goes into a business plan. Now, the other piece of it, part 2, which a lot of you touched on, and I wanted to draw out a little bit, is the aspect of who is this plan for? And I think the very important point there is that it's often viewed as something to be sent to funders, sort of like a proposal, and it's not. So funders are one stakeholder that you share a business plan with. The other folks you already touched on: team, partners, important stakeholders. Some people would even say government. It was really great to see that, saying, hey, why not put this up on our website even? Let everybody look, here's our plan. You could think about how much detail you want to give the whole world, but anyway, broadly speaking, this is our plan. Why does that matter? It matters because one thing that we have seen organizations try to do is say, can I give a consistent picture of my work to everybody? And we'll come into that a little bit more as well as we go along. So it's not just a proposal. It's not just for people within your team saying, hey, these are your goals, and next year we really hope you can achieve this. It's not just with the partner saying that, all right, we'll work together on this one project, like Francis, you touched on. Great, it'll be a good 6-month project. But does everybody know what I'm doing and what this is going to lead to? Kind of leads to an additional question. Sorry, I'll pause there. Any questions or thoughts on that before we get to this weighty question over here, which is, all right, that's great, but why do it at all?
That was really a good explanation, but I think with the landscape, like this work being dependent on funding and on other multiple factors, like we cannot for sure like plan what or where would we be in the next 3, 4, 5 years. Like maybe if after 2 years we get a funding for totally a different thing, we may change entirely the identity of our work and everything else. So I think the longevity factor is important, but it can work only within those organizations that have the possibility of functioning, like, consistently within one area.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. Any thoughts from the rest of the group on that point?
Yeah, as I was listening to the comment, I was trying to look at it from a couple of different perspectives. One of them being the CCCA perspective. Maybe a 5-year time horizon is possible in our context. And I do see this business plan creating not only a shared understanding amongst external stakeholders of what we're doing and what we plan to do, but it also helps align our internal teams as well, and maybe even beyond just their own projects. So they get a view of the whole organization and just not part of their section of the organization. And I can also see from a slightly different perspective how that conversation is a good result for that point in time, but things can change rapidly. So there's nothing stopping us in 6 months after the business plan has been created, reviewing it and going, well, we didn't know this was going to happen when it did, when we wrote this business plan. Let's adjust it. Let's tweak it so that we all use it as a basis for keeping everyone aligned and changing direction and making sure everyone knows why we're changing direction.
I'd like to piggyback on what Joe was just saying, because he sees things from a more organizational perspective, whereas I, for example, focus more on the substantive. Like I am also part of the team that does organization and stuff, but personally, I lead like substantive projects. And for me, I think that something that is very important about the business plan is actually that it helps us find direction for the substantive work. Like it's not so much about the outcome of it, of like, here's my business plan, here's this document that I share with others. That is, of course, very important. But to me, what is very important is also the process, because it will help us find clarity and direction in what we want to do and what are the possibilities for our projects, or like in which direction we may want to take those projects. So I think the reflection exercise is actually a key part of, having this document at the end. So the fact that you are open to revising it also is part of that reflective process. So it's not so much about like, what do I want it exactly to look like in 5 years? Because as Rafael was saying, you're not going to know what's going to happen. But it's more of like, do you have a plausible way of how this might play out and like the directions that I may want to go in?
Yeah, for me, having a business plan, at least it will help me to give a kind of, let's say, showing a kind of direction on where I would like to go in the future, and how I want to go to, how I will get there. There might be, let's say, I cannot say that I have to go with this fixed route. So, but there might be a kind of changes along the way. But at least in the business plan, I will still see my future target, still in my horizon. That's actually very important for me in the business plan. But how to get there, that could be adjusted along the way.
May I ask one question?
Please.
Yeah. I usually hear about strategy in my organization, and in this session, I learned about business plan. Could you help to explain the difference between strategy and business plan of an organization?
Okay, sure. The way I would put it is that your organization, one disclaimer I should give is that these things are often used. So I could give you a definition, but these words are often used interchangeably. So you'll hear strategy, strategic plan, business plan, sometimes even operational plan. So these words are used a lot. I think the really important thing to it is that the business plan does represent your strategy. So it's a plan. Right, as the name implies, some of this actually comes from the business world, where you have a business plan to do something with goals and so on. And I've also met organizations that just don't like the word, saying, well, we're not a business, so we do something else, which is fine. Right, you're free to use another. You could call it strategic plan instead. The point just is that the important part is the plan piece, that it's a plan that gives the details of your strategy. So for example, an organization could have a strategy saying that we're going to mobilize communities to do some work around their rights, let's say rights around environment or so. And here's how we're going to do it. That's our strategy to let's say have this change occur. The plan aspect of it might be that, all right, you'll do that, but what will you do in year one? Who are the on-ground partners you will work with? What kind of budget do you need for it? So you have a strategy, which can be quite broad, but the plan will actually put the details in to make it happen. So that's broadly what it is. But as I said at the start, these words are often used together. So when somebody talks to you about, say, strategy, or it's worth asking, look, what exactly do you mean by that? Do you mean a broad thing, or do you actually mean the plan? And
yeah, I got it. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So thanks everyone for sharing those thoughts. And this is something we'll come back to as we go along. So thank you, because there was a little bit of that variation there from what Rafael said to what Joel and Julia said to Paul. So there is variation around this, right? And a lot of this, and this is really important, because your view on this will also depend on your organization and where your organization is. So newer, younger organizations that are figuring out their path will have a certain way of looking at it, and others that are older, that have this track record behind them and are very clear that, yes, this is broadly what we will do, might have a slightly different go at it. I think the really important thing here is this long-term versus short-term. And thank you for some of the examples that were given. There are some things that don't change about an organization. It could be vision. Look, we were set up to achieve this. This is our vision. That's not going to change no matter what happens. And everyone here, the entire world has gone through and is continuing to go through the COVID pandemic. And I think we all know that a lot of plans had to be thrown out of the window when COVID hit. Right? I'm sure very few people had global pandemic under their risks in their plans, and to know exactly what to do when that happened, right? So I think we've all dealt with that and are dealing with that. And so there are things that don't change on the plan, though. There is still a vision. There are still values. This is what we stand for. This is why we do the work that we do. There could even be some goals that are around, no matter what path we take, in a few years, this is what we really want to accomplish. And there could be a lot of things that change in the short term. We plan to roll out this program. That's not happening now for a variety of factors. Could be COVID, it could be funding, it could be the partner decided to do something else, team members decided to leave. There could be a variety of reasons for it. Things can change and do change very quickly in the short term. The really important thing when putting down the business plan, which is what people would look for in a plan, is, can you separate out the things that will not change? In the long term, they will happen. Could be 5 years, might end up becoming 6 or 7, but they're really important. And the short-term thing saying that, look, we've planned for it, we're going to do it, but things might change, and then we'll change our plans accordingly, right? So this is that thing of business plans. And what I would request is to think of these plans as having these two aspects. Because if it goes on in one direction or the other, if the plan is only staying at the very high level, it only stays at vision and values, and we're going to achieve all these great things and stops there, then it gets very hard for somebody to believe the plan. It's like, yes, that's all great, but how are you going to do it? I'm not seeing any detail here. And the other side of it is that if there's a lot of detail and it's perfect and looks really great, it's also risky, because the first thing that comes along, that plans will change. And then, it gets really hard to actually execute. So I'll pause there. Any quick thoughts on that before we move on? Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, just something you said towards the end there resonated. You don't want to lose credibility by putting forward a plan that you don't or is unachievable. So you want to keep things realistic. And I was trying to compare that thought with the other one where, things are changing quite quickly. So you will adjust your plan in the short term according to those changes. So if you're using the business plan to help communicate to funders, you want to make sure that any changes you make to that plan or any results you achieve are credible, well measured. I guess it's really a tool for building trust and facilitating ongoing relationships.
Yeah, thank you. Powerful words around what these are, tools for facilitating trust and ongoing relationships. Going ahead a little bit with that kind of background in terms of what this is, let's now look at the pieces that actually go into a plan. And like we promised, we won't make this about templates. We will share a template and you can look at that, and some of these are fairly standard and so on. But we'll try to keep the conversation around what this means for me, as in each person asks that question. This is what a business plan is meant to answer. It's a means of communication, and you're communicating using a single plan with a variety of people, establishing trust, communicating, all of that. So with funders, with team members, with partners, all of that. So very broadly, to us, it kind of has these 4 pieces to it. Why does my organization exist at all? Like, there are lots of other things I and the other people on my team could be doing in their lives. Why are we here? Why are we in this organization? Why are we doing this work? So really, why do we exist? What is unique about my organization or approach? This gets really, really important. That whole, what is unique about this? How will I achieve my goals? And what do I need? What support? What do I need to be able to make this happen? And so we'll go into these one by one. But this is fundamentally what a business plan is meant to communicate. As I said, lots of templates, lots of details you can put in there, logic models, milestones, budgets, all kinds of engagement plans, branding, all of that. Those tend to be the details, and that all of them in some way serve to answer these fundamental questions. Let's take these one by one. Why does my organization exist? So one way in which people will sometimes answer this is to talk about some of those other things under that. Vision, mission, my purpose, these are my goals, this is what I'm trying to do. Any quick thoughts on that? Have you been asked this question, or have you asked yourself this question, like why do we exist?
I guess so, yeah. At least after Anna asked us to fill the form survey, okay. We reflected upon that and came up with the reason for our existence. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Other thoughts, other folks, like, is this second nature to you? Is this very easy? If somebody asks you, hey, why do you do the work that you do? Is that very easy, or does it need some thinking? And like, how hard or easy is this question to answer?
I would say this is actually the most difficult question that we need to answer when thinking about an organization, because all these vision, missions, and so on, it will represent, let's say, what we want to achieve in the long terms. Because this kind of let's say purpose or goals and so on, this is something that not only me that need to answer that question, but also my colleague, the organization itself. All people involved in the organization will have to have the same understanding on this vision, missions, and so on. That's why it is actually becomes the most difficult part to answer, for me at least.
Yeah, thanks for that, Paul. Any other thoughts? Yes, Rafa?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like, this is really crucial, especially like when you are trying to, engage more people with your organization and you are trying to hire more people, then unless and until you explain them like your mission, your goals, and the ideals that you are trying to pursue, it will be really difficult to work in an integrated form. So sometimes, like, we get hired or we join some organizations without knowing in depth what is the philosophy of their, like, organization and work. And if we are not told, there is a possibility that, we will get away from the mission that the organization was supposed to achieve. So yeah, this is really, really important. It's articulation, the part of articulation. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. And we'll put up an example shortly of an organization, and you can comment on it and what you think of how they put down their vision, mission, and some of this. This is the other part of it. The previous portion, as Paul touched on, Rafe added to that whole thing of, in some ways, those are the unchanging parts of the organization, broadly speaking. Or you can, but if you do it very infrequent, like don't do it too often. But that was around, why does my organization exist? This question here, the second one, is what's unique about it? And the thing I would add to that is, it's this whole thing of, why should someone join me? Why should someone support me? Any experiences from the group, or when you've tried to explain this to somebody? Yes, you exist. I know that's your vision, and there's all that, but what's unique about you? Yeah, Julia.
I have a question on this.
Please.
Yeah. The way we've been thinking so far about this question is more in explaining to the funders why we are not replicating other organizations' work, or, it's more geared to, why should you fund me? But then when I saw that you put as part of the question, why should someone join? I feel like there are different aspects to this question, and we may have been neglecting one of them. Because through this process with Nonprofit Builder, what we've also come to realize is that we are fairly unique, or at least uncommon, as the type of organization that we're trying to build and the way we work. So then this immediately prompted me the question, is this something that we should be including in our business plan, or our strategic planning, and whichever way we want to denominate it? And especially when it comes to talking to funders about it, because one of the themes that has been recurring in our discussions with through this process is that we need to align what we want to do with what the funders are willing to fund. And that also comes in terms of, like, team building. What is the type of model that we want to have? What is the model of organization that we want to have? And how much is that going to cost? So yeah, it just sort of struck me now when you said, when you put in the screen, why should someone join or support me, that we've been looking at why should someone financially support me for funders, but maybe we should be including the why should someone join, or why we think people should join us, and why is this attractive for funders in that sense, so that we include why the type of organization that we're building is also something worth supporting, or something along these lines. Sorry, I'm rambling a bit, but it's just coming as, it's just sort of coming up as we go through.
Yeah, thanks for that, Julia. Any thoughts, any responses to that from anyone else?
I just want to give an example of what we have experiences when it comes to one of the funders that we approached last time. When I'm apart from my role in IRIT, I'm still acting as the executive director of the Indonesian Renewable Energy Society. It is a kind of pro bono work. So we approached one, let's say, a funder, and then we told them that actually, in order to move the policy towards low carbon, we need to do a lot of things. One of them, let's say, scientific-based study, but the biggest part of it is actually advocacy, or sometimes we just call it lobby, because the work mostly will be related to lobby. They are not interested to fund us because they don't like the word lobby. So something like that. So it seems that international organization didn't like these terms, although it is actually very important. They would be willing to finance study, but not the advocacy work. But actually, you need both if you want really to move a policy. It's just a kind of an example. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. Thank you. Francis, you were about to say something. Yeah. You're on mute, I think.
Sorry. Yeah. Well, I just wanted to add. I think when we are answering this question, what is unique about our organization or our approach, it helps us define the scope of our work and the limitations of our work. But I think more importantly, we are, when we've done this, we can actually put ourselves and find our place in the ecosystem that we are working in. Because I think, like a funder, like if I'm the funder, and if you come to me and say, oh, I'm not unique at all, I can, I do what they do and they do what I do, like, why would I fund you? But I think if it's clear that, okay, like I occupy this particular spot, this is what's unique. I think it's called USP, some unique selling point. Like if you're selling a product, like which niche are you addressing, or which specific problem are you addressing? I think that really puts you, it's not only clarity on what and who you are, but also clarity in terms of what is your role in the ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks for that, Francis. And Julia, to come back to the point you made and to tie that back in, I think a way that we've seen folks, as you said, even that question of why should somebody join? And join could be that somebody becomes a part of your organization. It could be that somebody decides to partner with you. That clarity, and thanks for the points, everyone, which is around, firstly, internally, which is that I could do many different things. And if I arrive at, look, this is really what I'm really good at, or what my people are good at, this is what's unique about us, and the greater clarity there is around that, the easier it also becomes to say that, and therefore it becomes easier to communicate that and to know who else to partner with to accomplish something. Is how we've seen a lot of folks engage with the planning process itself. So through that process, yes, there's exactly what everyone said. A funder looking for, saying, wait, why should I fund you? What's special about you? And then it becomes this whole exercise of saying that, oh, this is what we're special. But the other piece of it is, and thanks, Francis, for bringing that ecosystem aspect of it, is that, yes, there are many other organizations in the ecosystem. And what's important through this is to know what I'm really good at, to understand what they're really good at, and see where that ground can be found. And as also that thing of, when there are people out there looking to join organizations or be associated with, that clarity does help, that this is what we're really good at. Having said all of that, I would just add one last thing. It also becomes easier once you've been around for some time to know that, look, this is my unique value, and I know this. When you're a very new organization, you're just starting out, it's quite likely that there are 3, 4, 5 things that you're doing and possibly good at. But then it takes some time to know that, okay, this is what I'm great at, or what the team is really great at. And so do give yourself a little bit of that space, that if you're very new, don't lock yourself into doing something which might change sometime later. On that, here's an example. It's a lot of words, I'm aware, but take a moment. This is an example. It's a real example. We did change some details. So it makes it hopefully a little difficult to understand or to identify the organization. But here's an example. And if you could take a quick look at going through that, and then do share your thoughts after that once you've had a chance to read it. This is what this organization has said about itself. Maybe just give me a thumbs up or a hand wave once you've read it, sort of read it. Yeah, all right. Some folks are done. We wanted to still reading, but I think we could get started. So let's say, as you are right now, you read this. And as I said, this is a real organization. So this is somebody actually wrote this out. What do you think? We just talked about two questions. Why do I exist? Why does my organization exist? What's unique about us or our approach? Any thoughts when you read this? Yeah, go ahead, Francis.
Yeah, well, the first paragraph is, making a case for war. Like, why do we need to work in Korea? It's because of its position, it's the problems and the role of Korea, and the potential for like winning the bigger campaign. So, and I think I was just looking at the paragraphs. So first one is making the case for war, or pointing to the problem and the issues. The second one is, what do we want to do? And the third one is like, okay, this is what we've been doing, and we have the people who can do it. Yeah, which makes them unique, I suppose. I mean, they actually have the word unique there. So in the last sentence.
Yeah, thoughts from anybody else? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Is it good? Not so good? Any thoughts?
That has been phrased in a very straightforward and simple manner. I like that. Like, no inclusion of fancy words, and so that's the thing that I like most about this, like introduction explainer.
Okay, all right. So simple, straightforward. And yeah, Joel.
Yeah, and I think the structure adds to that as well. It's kind of like, what Francis was saying in the beginning, that the problem statement sort of gets you right at the beginning. Here's the problem. And, I think as a lay person, I can read that paragraph and go, okay, I think I get that. And then they go straight into, here's how we play a role in fixing that problem. That's great. And they also include in the second half of that some of their results, and what we're doing is working, so that's good. And then it sort of, I like the way the last paragraph hooks you in a little bit more. It sort of moves from the empirical evidence to, I don't know, something a bit more from the heart. Here is us as a people. Here's how, I don't know, I read that last paragraph and I imagine what it would be like to work for that organization. You can't help but think that maybe they have a pretty cool culture. It's just an assumption, but if all that is coming from just this very simple set of words on a PowerPoint slide that breaks all the PowerPoint rules, it's doing quite well, isn't it?
May I share my thought?
Yes, please.
Actually, I totally agree with Fox on analyzing good points of this introduction. And I also have one critical question here. Is the name of the organization is about clean air, and that make me think about pollution like SO2, NOx instead of CO2 emission. But the introduction of the organization is actually raising the problem of CO2 emission. Then to me, I think it, I don't know whether this organization only focus on climate issue, or they also focus on equity issue as well. If they also focus on equity issue, then the introduction should also include the pollution and also maybe health impacts problem of air pollution as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. So thoughts on that, things that could be added to it. Yeah, other things that that have come up in the past when looking at this, is that it talks about the high quality expertise of the team, and it says that there are 4 lawyers, and so, but it doesn't say much about, let's say, how big the team is, or who sometimes who these lawyers are, or who, say, the founding members sometimes are. Again, it depends on how old the organization is. This one is 7 years old, so they might be past that point. But sometimes with younger organizations, those are details that help. All right, now who started this thing? Who are those 2-3 people who give it all of this legal expertise or power sector expertise? Some of that. Again, it's just one slide and not a lot of detail, but these could be some of the things to add to it. So yes, I would just say that as you think of your own organizations, and as we move on, these are some of, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that it also doesn't talk about the gap in the market that they are trying to fill. Like, are there other organizations that are working along the same model, or like it talks about like how successfully they have been working, but it doesn't show the gap that already exists in the market.
Yes, thank you for that. That's a really important point, because I will say that, and like we've seen a number of business plans, and one thing to be careful of, I think, when writing these out, not just for funders, right, but even internally or for teams, is to say that is to make it only about your own organization. That this is what we do. We're really great at this. This is our staff, and so. Because there must be other great organizations out there, or at least good ones out there. And just showing that, yes, this is what others do, but this is what we do uniquely, or so, showing that. And then, as Rafael said, saying that, okay, there's this gap that we address, perhaps uniquely. These are the important things that kind of need to come into the plan. Right, so thank you all for that. So we'll move ahead then a little bit. This is the portion of the plan that gets squarely into the how. It's also, I think, sometimes the parts that are the easiest to write out, because it's like, all right, we're now ready to actually put down some of the things, which are around how will we achieve our goals. There's a lot of different jargon that comes into plans at this time, right? Even just to throw some of that out there: theory of change, logic model, results framework, cascade, the words here: activities, outputs, outcomes, impacts, objectives, goals, SMART goals. So I think even if you did a little bit of a web search, if you're not already very familiar with this, there will be lots of things out there. And again, the point of this session is to say, yes, there are lots of templates, and that they're all fine and great. But to us, these are some of those aspects that are very important to draw out. The first of those are that, yes, as an organization, there are overarching goals. An organization would typically have one or more programs that they're running. It's sometimes an org has only one program, and that's fine too. Sometimes there are multiple, 2, 3, 4, 5 major programs. This is, when you think about a business plan now, this is where the plan aspect comes through a little bit more, which is, okay, what does that really look to you? So what are your program objectives? So there is this program. What is that program going to accomplish in a couple of years, 2 years, 3 years even? What's that? So putting down those objectives, which are more detailed, sometimes have more numbers, or at least more detail than goals. Goals can be kind of high level, that we're looking to do this, but objectives are, yes, this program is going to try to accomplish this thing. And then getting to the next 3, which you will typically see in a theory of change or logic model. But again, throwing the jargon away, what is that? Activities pretty much are, what am I doing? What will I do? What am I doing? Am I going to, and some of the examples that were already given over there, am I going to be writing research reports? Am I going to be doing on-ground community mobilization? Am I going to be hosting events or doing these convenings where I'm going to invite other people? And that's really important. So what am I doing, the activities? Followed by outputs, which are typically, all right, what are the immediate results? So right now, you wrote a research report, great. An immediate result of that could be that it got published, and on the website, we know that 100 people downloaded it. That's an output. We did this community mobilization exercise, and 300 people showed up. Right? That again is an output, and so on, things like that. Very tangible, very short-term, immediate. I did this, or I'm going to do this, and this will result from that immediately. Again, this tends to be the easier part of writing out a plan. Okay, I can see it, and then this will happen, and it will be great. The harder part tends to be the last one, which is, what is that going to lead to? So changes that occurred in the ecosystem. So for example, I wrote this research report, so there's some community mobilization that happened. Some other organization ran a media campaign as well. And, oh, actually, we got this law changed, or this new law came in, which is really great. And that's what we were hoping for. So there's a couple of important things in that definition. Outcomes are changes in the ecosystem. So things that happened, that resulted from it. They tend to be a little longer term. It's rare for an outcome to happen right away. We did the activity and hey, the next day there was an outcome. Typically takes months, years to happen. A lot of effort tends to go into making outcomes happen. And the other thing, very important one, is that very often you would contribute to an outcome. And it becomes very hard to say that, hey, I did this and that outcome is because of me. You could have contributed to it, but there could be other people who contributed to it. There could be other changes that happened that contributed to it, many other things. So other organizations doing their work, some government official who happened to take this up as a pet project. Did you get that government official in there? Probably not. They might have been elected or transferred there or some such thing, right? But they were very open to it and it happened. So there are outcomes. And this is the last thing I'll say on that is that you don't have to put pressure on yourselves to justify that I did this activity and that's why this outcome happened. It's perfectly fine to say that I was one of the people who contributed to it, and that's good enough. Otherwise, we do see this a lot in our business planning work. Organizations trying to draw this very clear line saying that this is because of me, and you don't have to do that typically. I'll pause there. Any thoughts on this? Because I think quite a few people have seen these words and created these plans and things. Any thoughts or any sharing of experience? Yeah, Francis.
What I find, like personally, what I find in my experience, like these are like really good, like things to, or questions to ask. My problem is sometimes when you work with two languages, especially if you have a lot of borrowed words, so like output, like my word for that would be quite closer to how it's written in English. Like, what did you do and what actually happened? But when it's outcomes, we actually use a borrowed word. We say resulta, which is results. But it's output. That's not outcomes. And it's just that in our language, it's easier to say resulta than say the words that actually mean outcomes as defined here, because I would be saying it this way, like anong pagbabagong nangyari sa lipunan, which is like it's very long and yeah, it's just something that I think is a challenge for us, because it's not just about like filling in, say, templates or like answering all these questions, but actually going through it in terms where people understand it. So that's just my feedback.
Yeah, and thank you for that. One thing, and it's absolutely what you said. If you're going to use this business plan, not just to send to funders, but you actually use it for your team, for people you're working with, for partners, all of that, it needs to make sense. One thing, as I said, there's lots of words out there, and we like you mentioned results, like even in the English language, results, people talk about impacts, there's all of this stuff. One thing you can do on this slide is delete the words in green. So just take them out. And it still is really important. It is, all right, what is your program going to do? What work are you going to do? Immediately, what's going to happen? And longer term, what's going to happen? And you could put different headings on that. But as long as that information is clear to you and the team, you'll be able to fill out any template that a funder throws at you or somebody else gives to you. Yeah, any other thoughts on this from the group? In our experience, this is in some ways the easier part of it, because you're writing down, all right, we're going to do this work and we know what work we're going to do and what it's going to lead to. But it also gets a little tricky sometimes to explain this. And that's why we do find people spending a lot of time on this, because, yeah. So any thoughts or experiences to share on that?
I feel that even explaining what is it that you do is sometimes really hard. Like especially if you're like a technical organization, you know, like when we say, for example, we're going to come up with an investigation plan and a case theory, it's like, it sounds very good, but if you're not in law enforcement, you have no idea what that means. So I think sometimes it's hard to translate to the funders what that actually is, also in order to manage their expectations of like what you're actually going to produce. But then we also have the flip of the coin, which I think is more present to other organizations, but we sometimes have to communicate it as well, where when you have, for example, something like socialization of a project, it's like, what does that even mean? And like, how do you actually break it down into like activities, and making sure that you translate for the funder why this is crucial, because if you don't have the support of the community, like nothing is going to happen, no matter how good your activities or your outputs. And for example, for us, that is often through other organizations that are actually grassroots and are on the ground and work with the communities. And I find that it's difficult to articulate in clear language what that entails. Like we have a vague idea of like what socialization means, but I think it's difficult to translate to funders. And I think that especially when you're dealing with funders or teams from different parts of the world, that is not clear. Like when you talk to a European funder about socialization, unless they have a lot of experience with funding projects, for example, in Latin America or in Asia or in Africa, they're not actually going to understand like what that means. So I think finding the language to translate this is often hard to describe your activities. And I completely agree with Francis on the language barriers. Like we also work in multiple languages, and sometimes it's just like, how the hell do I, like, what word do I use to explain this, or without making it, you know, like I need a paragraph to actually say one word.
Yeah, it's if I may, because it's just related to what Julia said and also links in with the previous comment. Sorry for barging in there, Hang. Just a quick one. Plain English is, you know, a term we've coined in English because it's so easy to complicate things with the English language, and it's so important to be able to say things in a way that the reader is going to understand, and your audience very rarely is, you know, the technical investigator like Julia was describing. It's the people that have nothing to do with investigations that need to be reading the plain English in a way that it resonates, that it creates the images that you're hoping to create for them. So yeah, just listening to you guys, it's like hitting home for me how important it is to make our business plans, you know, resonate as much as possible. And it seems like plain English is going to be a key factor there. Sorry about that.
I would like to add a bit on my experience on that. Yeah, I think first we are quite familiar with these terms, and we usually use that in what we call log frame in the proposal or in business plan of the organization. And for me, what we understand is this is really logic, because yeah, log frame is a logic, and all the elements here are presented in order and in logic to achieve step by step. So here I think activities is the lowest one. We conduct activities and then we get the output, and then we have outcome, and then we achieve the objective. I think I can take one example for this frame. Like we conduct a research as one activity, and then we got output. We got a report as output. Then we use the report to communicate, to send to decision makers. Together with workshop, together with other activities, we can contribute to the outcome that mindset changing of the decision maker. Then if we get the decision maker changing their mindset, we may achieve our objective, like they will change the policy. They will change the policy on energy, on clean energy, for example. So that is how we usually how to say design our law frame. Yeah. So I think maybe the language of different country or different donors may be different, but the logic of the frame, I think is quite common understanding among different countries or different partners.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for that, and for sharing the example. I'm going to skip over this. We will send you an example as well, and so you can look at some of these objectives, activities, and some of it. I want to tie what you said to the last bit on it, and which in some ways we've already touched on, which is, all right, I'm going to do all this work. I'm going to do these activities, going to lead to this. This is what I need to achieve my goals. So the most common one there is financial budget. You know, I need this kind of funding. I need these technical resources, possibly. And I need these people to do this work. And there could be many other kind of resources as well. It could include partnerships that you have, what other people are you need other people to work with you on some of these. So this is what goes into the business plan as the last bit. What I will say is that these last two portions, a lot of work goes into preparing budgets, writing this down, team structure, what does my organization look like, a lot of these aspects. And this is also to tie it back to the point what we spoke about earlier. In some ways, this is also the stuff to not get very attached to, because it can change. Right? So I would just say that when you're creating business plans and using business plans, which is what we'll talk about in a moment, go back to that earlier thing of that are some things, long-term vision, values, things that will not change. And there are some things that are shorter term, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year kind of programs. And depending on the scenario that I'm in, COP26 is coming up, for example. If something happens there or some announcements are made there, maybe that changes plans, right? And it's okay. So the point just being is that do put in the work on these two things. What is my log frame? What am I trying to do? What budget do I need? All of that. What resources? Very important. But also at some points, we have worked with organizations that have had plans change and they've had to adjust. And so this is one of those tricky things that, yes, put it into the plan, think about it, but to some extent also maybe don't get completely attached to it, because you might actually want to change that as you go along. We'll send this to you. In some ways, these are the formal parts of what goes into a business plan document. So we'll send you a template and example. It has this. And we've kind of touched on all of this already. Yeah, so you will see that in some ways, these map to the 4 big questions that we talked about. And a lot of the later ones, like let's say 8 onwards, are around resources. What's the team I'm going to build, strengths of the team, risks I'm going to face, budget, and so on. One important thing, and also just watching the clock a little bit, but we do have time for it, which is around this. I do want to open this up now to the group, which is, and to put this question there, we won't do the Menti poll. We don't have time for that right now. But let's say you do this. You take a template, you might have one already, or you might use the one we send you, and you put down the business plan. With whom do you share the plan? And I'll add another question to it. Who works on the plan, or who should work on the plan? Any quick thoughts on it? Who should work on the plan, and with whom will you share it?
I think it is a collective effort. Preparing a business plan is a collective effort. So I think the core team at least, or the core team, I would say, should be involved in it, and we will share the business plan. I think it depends, like after this entire conversation, I would say it depends, like according to the need. Sometimes we will be sharing with the donors, at other times we will be sharing, like, you know, with these partners, strategic partners, and yet at other times maybe we would be putting it on the website for everyone to see and even share their comment, especially if it involves some public goals. So yeah.
Thank you for that. Other thoughts, other folks? Do you agree with that? Anything to add to that? Yeah, go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, I think one of the important aspects from a CCCA perspective will be to use the business planning process as a tool for creating conversations across the entire organization. We're not a large organization. We have 17 people. So we're not, talking about something that's not feasible. But I can imagine, a core group and a core team working on the initial ideas that go into the business plan, but then very quickly taking those ideas to the other parts of the organization that aren't directly involved and asking the simple question, what do you think about this? What does it look like from your perspective? And letting the business plan evolve based on, in part, information from, the sort of outlying areas of the organization that wouldn't typically find themselves in a business planning process.
Yep, thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I could imagine, for example, if as an NGO, if we would work with community, then the community that would be involved or would have an impact, or those communities that will get an impact of your activities could be part of the process in the business plan development, actually. Because at the end, this community would need to know if we do something, what does it mean for them?
Thank you. On that point, I think, and you've all touched on it, and there are 2 key things that I'm taking out. I will start with this one. It's kind of that question, how long does it take? Well, we'll talk about that, but the sub question under that, do I prioritize alignment or perfection? And you've all kind of touched on it in different ways. And here's what I just like to say on that. It's possible, and we've seen this We've seen CEOs of organizations or EDs, even of sometimes mid or larger size orgs, say, I'll do the plan, and I'll sit and write it out, and I'll do it really quickly. It'll get done in no time at all. Right? It's in my head. Right, I'll write it out. It'll take a week, 2 weeks, maybe, and all of that, and it'll be done. And what a lot of you have talked about is the other side of that, saying that it's not just about putting down a plan. It's about what are you doing with that? So it's a means of getting buy-in. It's a means of involving multiple people on the team. And I've put it as a question, but at least my view is that alignment, and thank you, Paul, for the angle on it's also the communities that you're working with, not just people within the organization necessarily. That alignment is what the business planning process is one of the greatest values of the business planning process. Because like we've talked about, the plans could change, scenarios could change, you may change your programs, you may change your outputs. What doesn't change? Probably vision and values don't change. We're kind of clear about that. Here's why we exist, what we're going to do. And here are the people that are going to be part of that journey in some way. So prioritizing that alignment. And that means that it sometimes takes longer. Now, I would also recommend that business planning not take like more than 6 months or a year or so. That's probably too much. You could probably come back to it, but a few months, let's say. But that alignment aspect, people within the organization, people outside communities you work with, very important part of that. And so when you think about, I'm going to do business planning, how long is this going to take? Or if you get that question, all right, great, we need to make a business plan. Sounds good. Does it take 2 weeks, a month, 3 months, 5 months? Again, the answer will depend entirely on you and who you think really needs to be in alignment as you make this plan. Last point on this, and then we can go to wrap up, is to the point, it kind of came out, but I just want to emphasize it. And Rafael, you mentioned it, and Joel touched on it as well. The business plan is a document that you create and the team creates, and you do it together, maybe with your board or partners, funders, whoever. You get together and create that. That plan then leads to many other things. You could take pieces of that and put it on the website. You can take pieces of it and put it into a proposal. You can take that and make it part of your team's goals for the year. So many things will come out of that plan. So you should really look at perhaps having one business plan. And that will lead to maybe 5, 6, 7, or 10 different ways. There are 5 or 10 different ways in which it could be used. But I would request you to not have multiple business plans. I mean, you should have one plan, and then you can use it in many different ways. Otherwise, it can get really confusing.
Yeah, one is confusing enough sometimes.
Yes. Yes. All right. Apologies, we are over time at this point. I mean, we're happy to hang on to the call if others are, but I just wanted to just put up next steps on this. We will send you an email by the end of this week, very, very soon, that has some of these templates, tips and tricks. Do look at those, do reflect on those, and do go back to those questions around, yeah, why do I really need the plan? Do I have the info? Who is going to work on this with me? And what am I going to do with it? And I'll stop there and hand over, Anna, if you have any closing thoughts. Yes, and as I said, we can hang on for a bit, but if people are busy, then please feel free to drop off. Thank you.
Absolutely true. Thank you very much, Arjav. It was really very nice presentation and really going in depth with very serious questions. And thank you to everyone for participating. Your contribution was also very valuable, and it really added lots of a lot of interesting elements to the whole discussion. So yes, let's probably finish on that. Thank you so much, and we will follow up with materials from Arjav by the end of this week or early in the next week. Thank you so much to everybody, and see you in the following sessions. Bye-bye, bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. And see you.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.